Hearthstone, what are we gonna do with you? I've been playing the game since Rastakhan's Rumble expansion, which is about the start of 2019, but it's been on a very on and off basis. It usually went like this. I'd play for a few weeks, get angry and bored, leave the game for a few weeks, come back when a new expansion is announced, get back into the game, rinse and repeat for about 4 times. And during my experience with the game, I've had a lot of problems with not only the gameplay, but also how Blizzard Activision has been handling the property. But this 5th and final time I returned to the game, things were slightly different, because not only did they announce the madness at the Darkmoon Faire expansion, but they also announced a complete revamping of the rewards and progression system of the game. And this was it. This was the perfect opportunity for the company to acknowledge people's concerns, the criticisms, the feedback they received, and make a better game. A bigger game. Did they address any of their issues? Did they improve on the game over time? Have they redeemed themselves in the eyes of both me and the many players like me? My answer? Nope. Sadly, some of the problems I and many players have had still exist, and whilst others aren't as bad as they used to be, new problems have popped up as well. This is a video basically highlighting my experience with the game over the last 2 years. I was going to call this video 99 Problems with Hearthstone so I can make a cheap Jay-Z reference, but nah, that's too shitty, so I just thought I actually had more than 99 problems with Hearthstone, and this video will highlight most of them. But before I continue, I will say a couple of things before I get to the actual points. Ever since I started playing the game, I've been a free-to-play player. Not a single penny has been spent, and all the gameplay footage you see is that of a free-to-play player's experience. Here's my entire transaction history before I left for the 5th and final time to prove it. Secondly, the majority of this video will be subjective, aka my opinion. If you like the game, then great. In the end of the day, it's just a matter of perspective. However, there will be some more factual and informative statements, but not too many. And lastly, all of the gameplay footage you see and all the stuff I'll be talking about is of my experience during the whole month of November 2020. So chances are, if you're watching this, the game will be different to how it looks in this video. Might have been a few changes. Hell, they might have done a complete U-turn and made an amazing game, far from what you see here, but I doubt it. So let's start off with some nitpicky stuff with the settings and the tutorial. Now the first problem is mainly Blizzard Activision's problem as opposed to mine, because they're missing out on a huge opportunity to appeal to the Steam community. That's because Hearthstone has been relegated to the Battle.net launcher, which means you gotta create a new email, passwords, fill in contact information, some sort of authenticator you have to use. It'd be a pretty bum move to not have Hearthstone on Steam or any other big storefront. If you do start the game for the first time, or if you create a second account like I did, you'll be treated to a long but pretty decent tutorial explaining the rules of the game. It does a decent job, but the problem is, it's unskippable. So if you already know how to play the game, well tough, you have to. All 6 matches, which could take about half an hour I'd say. The skip option would be appreciated, especially if, as mentioned earlier, you're just making a second account so you could get that Morgul skin. When you do get to the menu, you may be treated to a card update box, which details all the cards that have been nerfed and buffed recently. The red outlines detail nerfs and the green ones detail buffs. You'll see more of the former though, but we'll get to that later. The little nitpick is, once you click away from the box and get to the main menu, there's no way to get the update box back. It's gone forever, as if it never existed. Maybe if there was an icon at the bottom of the screen, or if there was an option in the settings that allowed you to look at the cards again, because otherwise you go into my collection and have to scroll through all the cards again to find the ones that can get you a full dust refund. Doesn't matter too much with some cards though, since some of them can be disenchanted, so bummer. When you go to settings, you'll notice there is a music and master slider for the volume controls, but not for sound effects or voice, which is odd considering games like Runeterra and Eternal have these sound effects and voice volume controls, or at least one of those, but the most profitable digital card game in the world doesn't. Maybe they just forgot. And this isn't really part of settings, but more of the settings of the matchmaking system. When you face up against an online opponent, it just goes to quick match every time, so you can't tweak your preferences. You can't filter online matches by ranking or region or connection strength. You can't even set custom rules to spice things up during a match, even though in other free apps like Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro you can. Now we got the nitpicky stuff out of the way, let's go to the big kahuna that is the Battle Pass. As mentioned earlier, the main reason I returned was because they introduced the Battle Pass, which other games like Fortnite and Magic the Gathering Arena have had for quite a while now. Better late than never, I suppose. Sadly though, the Battle Pass's launch was very flawed. Instead of getting gold for completing daily quests, you now get experience. Gaining experience allows you to level up. When you level up, you gain a reward from the Battle Pass's reward tracker, but you get the final proper reward at level 50, where the final proper reward is a premium hero skin. In the Hearthstone YouTube channel, they uploaded a video of an overview detailing what these changes are. This was an interview, well, quote-unquote interview, it was very heavily scripted and very cringy indeed, between some influencer I've never heard of and one of the Hearthstone's gaming directors, Ben Lee. One of the most interesting things Ben Lee said was, quote, "We're absolutely not taking away any of the gold you can earn. With the introduction of the Battle Pass came the removal of the gold you get from winning matches. With the old system, you gained 10 gold for every 3 wins a day. You could do this up to 10 times, so you could play 30 matches to earn 100 gold a day. But they completely removed it without really telling us that they were going to do so. You're taking away one of the most important forms of gold income for most hardcore players." Yeah, quite a crafty move there, Mr. Lee. However, in terms of the actual quests and the amount you get, the system's pretty much the same. You only get 1 new quest a day, which means if you have no daily quests at all in your quest log, then you have to log in every day for the next 3 days to fill it up again. It'd be more convenient if they just automatically filled all the empty slots when you sign in, that way you got plenty to do, but I guess not. The same goes for weekly quests too. You only get 1 new weekly quest every week, which means you have to log in every 7 days over 3 weeks. Yet again, just filling up all your slots when you sign in would really help. But I think the Battle Pass's main problem is the grind. At first, it's not so bad. To get from level 1 to level 2 for example, you only need 100 XP, and your typical daily quest has a minimum of 800 experience to give out. It's quite a clever psychological trick they played, since with previous expansions, you would get 2 or 3 packs for free just by logging in when this expansion is first released. But now those 2 or 3 packs are now locked behind the Battle Pass. Just seems like adding an extra step that shouldn't be there really. But I found that after a while, the game just got more grindy and grindier, and getting rewards was more difficult because it required more quests to complete and more time to spend in the actual game. It felt that way as soon as level 15, and by the end of recording all my footage I was about level 21. I still had like 29 levels to get that ultimate prize of the premium hero skin, and it already felt like progress was slowing to a crawl. I can't imagine what it's like for people who reach like level 40. To reach level 50, you need 196,200 XP total. On average, that would mean about just under 4,000 XP per level, but the way it's distributed tricks you into thinking, wow, the first 10 levels was easy, this should be a piece of cake. But when you get near the end, it's like, oh, well this sucks. There's this article on outof.cards' website, I'll leave a link in the description below, but what it does is that it uses calculations and gathers data to estimate how long it would take for you to get enough experience to reach level 50. It takes into account the fact that you get 400 XP on average per hour of gameplay, not sure if that's true, but that's what they say, that you complete as many daily and weekly quests as possible a week, and completing the achievements to get experience from them. So, how do you reduce the grind? Simple. You buy their Tavern Pass, of course. What do you get from this Tavern Pass? Well, you get a handful of premium skins, aka gifts, okay. You get a golden version of a legendary everybody got for simply logging in at the time, okay. You get a new image for your coin card, okay. And you get an experience bonus. What is this experience bonus? Between 10 to 20%. All this for $20. Now if that doesn't sound like a bargain, I don't know what does. To me though it doesn't, as it doesn't sound like it provides that many benefits. Certainly not enough to warrant that price tag. Seriously, damn. And whilst we're talking about prices, let's go to the store. The store is organised well enough, but there are some noteworthy topics we can focus on. For example, when you're buying a card pack, you can only choose a custom quantity when you pay with gold, but you can't with real money. Instead, you have to buy a set amount. Solo venture prices. Quite pricey indeed, considering that most of them are just a bunch of AI opponents, with quote-unquote exclusive cards, some of which are actually craftable without needing to buy the expansion. Prices range between about $12 to $20, and there's like 5 or 6 of them too. So you can easily be spending more than the price for a brand new AAA title like Red Dead Redemption 2. So what does the store sell? Card packs. So what about the card packs themselves? Let's take a gander. Card packs are basically loot boxes in disguise. These card packs have been the same since day one, and with little to no change whatsoever, which I find kinda odd since they function exactly the same, but I guess because they look like cards it's perfectly fine. Nobody really likes them. People detest them because it's such an archaic method of obtaining digital rewards. They're random, and often not you get tools and resources you don't want. Can I just pick what I want? I mean, Runeterra gives you wild cards. These can be traded to get a card of that same rarity of your choice. I guess there's crafting, but more on that later. What's even stranger is how these card packs have similar valuations to real life booster packs you could buy at your local shop or something. Booster packs in my country cost about $4, I'd say, and the fact that these Hearthstone quote-unquote card packs are priced similarly is kind of laughable. There's a reason why real booster packs and the cards that you get from them are more valuable than Hearthstone's equivalent. Is because you could trade them, you can buy them, they have physical properties, shiny cards are actually holographic, and the reason they're priced for that is for the many expenses. The machinery, the people who work on them, the artists, the properties, all the resources needed to print the cards, you get the idea, there's so many expenses. But because a lot of Hearthstone cards are made digitally via computer, I imagine they don't have as many of those expenses. There's a whole community dedicated to custom cards, so it can't be that hard to produce them. But most importantly, real cards increase or decrease in actual value, whether it's due to scarcity or how often they're used in the competitive scene. Cards like Dark Magician and Blue Eyes White Dragon aren't very good nowadays, but because they see lots of support and are seen in multiple decks, they see a lot of competitive play and therefore worth more money, usually anyway. Hearthstone cards don't have that, they're just pictures on a screen. With real cards you can preserve them forever as long as you treat them with care. With Hearthstone, when the servers are long gone, all those cards are gone forever. Money wasted. You don't get much value from them since there are only 5 cards per pack compared to the 9 or 12 you get from other card games like Eternal or Yu-Gi-Oh! What's annoying is when you open a pack and you get 2 of the same card in the same pack. This once happened to me twice in a row. The beautiful thing about digital card games is the ability to do things that you wouldn't be able to do in an actual real printed card game. You know, to tweak the coding to prevent this sort of bullshit from happening. It's one thing to get 2 cards that you might use in the same pack, but getting 2 cards you'll never use in the same pack? What a waste of space. Just like me, really. I mean, there are so many filler cards. They're either too gimmicky for use in regular decks, or just inferior to other cards that already exist.
Hemotnazing Wary
is one of the worst cards, period, in Hearthstone. Sure, it can destroy beasts, but there are plenty of other cards with much broader conditions making them better alternatives. That Kobold Rogue card that can destroy a minion and all copies of it in the deck. You've also got Big Game Hunter, which can destroy a minion with 7 or more attack, and that's any minion, not just a certain archetype. Another example of filler cards include Light's Champion, which can silence a demon, but the problem is Ironbeak Owl exists, and Spellbreaker exists. They're good alternatives, because they can silence anything. And then there are cards that do similar things in the same set, but one's clearly better than the other. For example, you got in the Dark Moon expansion there's Stagehand, which can give a random minion in your hand +1/+1. Problem is, there's a neutral called Costumed Entertainer, which does the same thing but gives the random minion +2/+2. So why would you ever use Stagehand over Entertainer? It doesn't make sense. You'll be opening a lot of packs though because you have too many legendaries per set. On average there's about 27 per set to collect. And there's a 1 in 20 chance, according to the community, of getting a legendary in your pack. There have been times where I've been very fortunate, like getting 2 legendaries in one pack, but that's extremely rare and that's probably the only time that ever happened for me, even after opening hundreds of packs over the last 2 years. I'd say using simple mathematics, you'll need to open about 400 to 500 packs in order to get the complete set of legendaries. I guess the good news is by that point you probably have the epics and rares as well, but bear in mind, that's just for one set. There's at least a dozen of them, so you can easily be opening like what, thousands to catch up to the whole collection metagame. Good thing there's duplicate protection, but with that it limits your dust income because you're more likely to get new cards and less dust to craft your own cards because you're not getting as many copies. So yeah, it's a bit of a double-edged sword really. Thanks Blizzard. And one last note, it would have been nice if there was the ability to trade or sell cards to other players. I know people hated the auction house in Diablo 3, I'll take their word for it, I've never played Diablo, but even so, it would be a nice little addition, you know, a nice little experiment to see if it would work with the Hearthstone community. At least give it a shot. And from card packs to card backs and hero skins, or portraits or whatever you want to call them. It's annoying how some of these premium hero skins are locked behind premium bundles that cost about $70 each. Like to get N'Zoth from the Dark Moon Fair expansion, you can't just buy the hero skin separately. I also don't like how you're unable to purchase any limited time event card backs and hero skins. Some of these look so cool and some were only distributed in events, but because those were long gone and only one-time affairs, they're lost forever and I can't obtain them anymore. Some can only be received by getting 5 wins during ranked play, like several years ago. So unless they reappear somehow, they're impossible to get. You can't even buy them with gold or even real money. Same goes for hero skins. If I wanted to play as the alternate paladin skin, Sir Onoyo, or warrior alternate Deathwing, or the warlock alternative Mecha Jiraxis, I can't because I can no longer buy them or pre-order them or what have you. There are some premium hero skins you can unlock by fulfilling certain conditions. With Morgul the Oracle, for example, you need to use the Recruit a Friend system. With the Paladin skin Liadrin, you'll need to reach level 20 in World of Warcraft in order to get her. Then there's unlocking the golden versions of the default hero skins. Want a golden animated Jaina Proudmoore for your mage class? 500 wins. And that's for each class, by the way, if you want their golden alternates. If you want alternate artwork for Jaina Proudmoore, you need to get 1,000 wins. Fortunately, that's not on top of the 500 wins you've already got, but still 1,000 wins for each class to get their snazzier alternative artwork. Now, for the most part, the game looks really nice and really looks the part. I mean, take the loot boxes, all the flashy animations and colours, the achievements that pop up in the bottom left screen. Well, they make opening packs look so eventful and meaningful, even though they're not, and they're just window dressing something that has little to no value outside of the game itself. But let's talk about the card art, which is amazing actually. All the artwork is amazing, and credit goes to those people who worked hard to make these pictures look really good. Some do stick out a bit too much though, like for example Leroy Jenkins. Some don't quite fit the tone of the game. Majority of the cards have this sort of dark, realistic fantasy look, while some cards look like they came straight from a comic book or something. Don't get me wrong, look good, but they just don't really fit with the rest of the imagery. Then there's the artwork censorship and the alterations made to the images. Some of these changes are pretty ironic though. Secret Keeper, a card whose only real crime was showing a woman's fully clothed and covered up butt, by the way, is apparently wrong, but Jaina's cleavage and Priestess of Fury's costume, or lack thereof, is perfectly okay, I guess. And then there's Succubus, which was replaced by Fellstalker. Much better. Then you got card art which originally had blood being removed from the image, and other card art with blood in it as well, but was left in and wasn't removed for some reason. Then there's the inconsistent card text grammar and the layout of the text. For example, a word can be in all caps in one card, but not in another, even if it's used in the same context. You've got cards with very similar effects, but are just worded differently. Meat Wagon uses the recruit mechanic, but for some reason doesn't use the recruit keyword, and instead just tells you to summon from your deck. Then you got cards that tell you to cast a secret from your deck, and others telling you to put a secret into the battlefield, which is pretty much the same thing. And a word can be in bold in one card, and that very same word yet again used in the same context would just not be in bold. Cringy flavor texts, there are a bunch of them. They're not so bad every now and then, but they appear so frequently. You got puns, you got dad jokes, you got dated movie references like Scarface and He-Man and The Matrix. Hell, they even made a pun on the Red Bull energy drink slogan. You know, Red Bull gives you wings, red blood gives you wings. Then there's the deck helper, which ironically isn't very helpful. They give you suggestions, but some of them aren't really appropriate for the deck you want to make. It's like the game doesn't really consider what deck you're making, whether it's a zoo deck or a secret deck or a deck revolving around inflicting damage on your minions to buff them up. It's insufficient. Then there's the crafting section, which has an uncraftable cards filter for some reason, even though you can't craft them or disenchant them, so what's the point? And when you're looking at the cards in my collection, some of the cards are missing some details about what minions and spells do, or what cards are created by their effects and such. Kronk's Dragonhoof says if you're Galakrond, unleash a devastation, but what's a devastation? What does that mean? What devastation can I unleash? Same goes for Kalimos's invocation. What is an invocation? What options would I have? What are Mechatorx's inventions? What are War Druid Loti's many forms? That sort of thing. It's weird because they're willing to do that with other cards, like anything involving soul fragments or corrupted cards, but not for those. When you're creating a deck, it has to be exactly 30 cards, making it very inflexible compared to other card games like Eternal or Yu-Gi-Oh! And because of the small decks, matches don't tend to last quite as long, and it's even more of a pain with decks revolving around milling, like with Ticketus for example, or any of those Murloc cards. And when you're constructing decks, you can't construct decks with cards you don't own, at least not in-game anyway. You can do it via the official Hearthstone deck creator and in Hearthpwn, but when it comes to actually doing it within the game itself for convenience, you can't. The dust economy is awful. The fact you need to disenchant 4 legendaries just to get the 1 to craft, or need to get rid of 8 commons to get 1, is ridiculous. And don't get me started on golden cards. They cost significantly more. I should know, I tried crafting a golden Galakron Warlock deck. You have no idea how many cards I had to get rid of to get this. It's funny how cards of the same rarity cost the same even though they're far from equal. Legendaries like Millhouse Manastorm and Borf are considered terrible, and yet some meta-defining cards like Ziliax, Leroy Jenkins, Ragnaros, they cost the same but are clearly several times better than them, but they cost the same amount of dust to craft. I preferred it if their valuations were determined by how relevant they are in a meta, or how powerful the developers consider them to be. Disenchanting gives you little to no dust at all. You get 5 for commons and 400 for legendaries. At least give us 50% of the crafting cost, so we don't get too fucked over. Oh yeah, and you can't disenchant basic cards, even if you already own the golden versions of them. You can only have 2 copies per deck, so if I have the golden versions, at least allow me to disenchant the regular ones. When am I ever going to need 4 if I can only have 2 per deck? Oh yeah, and also, you can't disenchant some gifted cards, like I crafted this golden Galakron, but I can't get rid of my regular one because it was gifted to me by the game itself. Annoying. The meta, as many people would say, is the game people play when they're not playing the game. Well, that's what Joseph Anderson said in his old video. Our objective in Hearthstone is to build a top tier deck so we can get more wins. More wins means more fun because we get more rewards out of playing a deck everybody else is using. Because who needs customization and personalization when you could just do what everyone else is doing? The sheeple we are. That's why everyone uses the same decks like Aggro Demon Hunter, or Spell Mage, or any deck that revolves around mana cost reduction, or Resurrect Priest, or Token Druid. All these decks that see regular play because they give out the most consistent and efficient win rates. The main culprit for me anyway is Demon Hunter, because most classes are not versatile enough to deal with some situations. Demon Hunter is so powerful because it can deal with specific tasks quite frequently. It can heal, it can summon a bunch of minions with one card, it can increase their hand size quite quickly, it can do a lot of face damage with some heavy buffs to your hero's attack power. It was a better aggro class than Hunter. That's saying a lot. Other classes aren't as versatile because they're only really good at 2 or 3 things really at tops. Warriors are usually only good for armor and big minions. Mages are only really good for secrets and spells. Priests are only really good at healing and dragons. Hunter is only really good at aggro and beasts. You get the idea. The classes themselves have a leveling up system too. However, it caps at 60. So once you've got all the rewards for that class, there's less incentive to continue with that class once you've reached it. Takes a while, but still. There are no optional starting hero powers in play mode. You do get some in other modes, but for the most part, Mage will always have the Fireball at the start. Warlock will always have Death Tap, which ain't a bad thing since that's arguably the best hero power. Shaman and Rogue is the worst, since Shaman's chance based since you can't choose which totem you want to summon, and Rogue is one of the worst because it's useless if you already have a weapon equipped. So yeah, the hero powers are imbalanced, and the lack of freedom to choose which hero power you want depending on your playstyle really limits what you can do with your decks. Some hero powers are borderline ineffective, like with Mage's Fireball. It's too generic, and there aren't many Mage decks that utilize this ability very well. Unless you're playing a Berserker deck, but who does that with Mage? And Arcane Amplifier uses it and synergizes with it quite well because it boosts the hero power's damage output. The only way to change the hero powers really is by using the effect of a minion or spell. Battlefields are randomly selected. Getting to use Transfer Student effectively is not always the case, since that card's effect is based on which battlefield you're on. Some effects are better than others, and how good Transfer Student is depends on which battlefield you get. At the start of a game there's the Mulligan Phase. The problem is, sometimes you select the cards to replace, they end up being replaced by the very same card you wanted to replace. Third time this happened, I only had 1 copy of the card in my deck and I got it back even after replacing it during the Mulligan Phase. The game should be coded in a way to prevent this from happening. They have the ability to do that with it being a digital card game, so I don't see why. Your starting hand size is a bit too small for my liking. You start off with 4 if you go first, or 5 if you go second. I think in Yu-Gi-Oh you have 5 or 6, and in Eternal you have like about 7 or 8, giving you more options during your starting turn. If only they use something like what Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories has, where in your next turn you draw cards until your hand is filled again, and because of hand size and hand fatigue, there's a great reliance on mana curve. Getting the cards of the same cost as the amount of maximum mana you have. So if you have 6 mana, it's usually best to draw a card with 6 mana. Never ever played a game with such a dependence on drawing the right card at the right time to get the most out of my turns. A lot of the times that doesn't happen and I get screwed over because I didn't follow the mana curve closely enough. It's frustrating. There are times where you just can't play any cards for several turns. Most of the time it's for the first 1 or 2 turns, but there'll be times where you can't play a card for 3, 4, maybe even 5 turns, even if you're playing something like a zoo deck. In a lot of card games, they have some sort of countering system. In Eternal, they have fast spells. In Yu-Gi-Oh, they have a chaining system, traps and quick spells. And in Runeterra, you have this sort of constantly switching between players. Like if it's your opponent's turn, they do something, then it switches to your turn to do something. Once you've done it, then the opponent gets to do something, then you do something. It's like a constant flip-flopping between players, so that you're constantly given opportunities to retaliate. In Hearthstone you can't, because you can't even do anything during your opponent's turn. There's no interactivity. You're just watching them do what they gotta do. And even if you have the perfect cards in your hand or battlefield, well, tough. It's a bit like playing chess, but a worse version of chess. Because the Battle Pass's experience system rewards players for spending longer in matches, more and more people are roping, because the longer you spend in a match, the more experience you get at the end, even if you win or lose. So wasting time is rewarded? Shouldn't it be penalized? Then there's the lack of a graveyard or discard pile. In Yu-Gi-Oh you have a graveyard, and with Eternal you have the Void. It opens more doors for new cards and effects for those cards. When you resurrect minions, they're always random. You can't pick which minions you want. In other card games like Yu-Gi-Oh, if you have too many cards in your hand, you get to choose which cards you discard from your hand, giving you more control. Imagine getting a Shudderwock in your next draw but getting destroyed because you already have 10 cards. RNG. First off, they're summoning random minions. A couple of cards are okay, because they only have small card pools, like Animal Companion can summon one of 3 beasts. Then there's Unstable Portal, which can literally give you any minion in the entire game. Sometimes you'll summon a 1/1 Death Imp, or sometimes you'll summon a 12/12 Deathwing. Shrinks the gap between a professional player, in air quotes, and a newcomer who just started playing for the first time. Getting screwed is a common thing in Hearthstone. You get screwed by random effects, whether it be doing a damage range between 2 to 4 damage, transforming a minion into something good or bad. Then you got random target selection when playing minions or spells, hitting the wrong enemies, making some stupid illogical moves that screw you over. Wouldn't have happened if you had the ability to select your targets, which some cards do. A lot of them don't. At the end of the day though, all it comes down to is there's just way too much RNG and chance involved. So much so that the fact they're trying to make this game a competitive one with an actual esports culture is actually quite laughable. That's like trying to host a tournament for Monopoly or Uno. When you have a roster of cards like Yogg-Saron, Solarian Prime, and Shudderwock, cards that can determine the outcome of a game just by merely being played, yeah, it doesn't quite add up. Just out of morbid curiosity, I decided to see how much RNG is actually involved in the game, and that is why I went through every single expansion up to the Darkmoon Faire, which was the most recent one as of this video, just to see how many of the cards in each set have a random effect, random selection method, or generates a card that has a random effect. And in doing so, I've created 2 tables. The first one is for the solo adventures, starting with the Curse of Naxxramas up to the Demon Hunter Initiate set. It's because their sets are smaller and it didn't feel fair to bundle them up with the big boys. At least 4 of their 7 sets had at least a third of the cards with some sort of random effect. But now let's look at the main sets, the big sets, starting with Basic up to Darkmoon Faire pre-add-on. So as you can see, despite Basic and Classic set having the largest amount of cards in their sets, they had some of the lowest percentages of random cards in them. Basic only had 6% of random cards, and only 11% of the cards were random in Classic. However, as soon as the very first proper expansion, Goblins vs Gnomes, you can see it shot up and has nearly tripled. 30% of those cards had some sort of random effect in some shape or form. Grand Tournament 20, Whispers of All Gods 20, Mean Streets Gazazan 22, some were as high as a third, like Rise of Shadows for example. So it's no wonder why people are saying, oh, old Hearthstone, OG Hearthstone was the best, because, you know, it actually required more strategy. And judging from these statistics that I've gathered up, as fairly as possible, you know, they might actually have a fair point. It's certainly one worth considering at the very least. But then we got keywords and mechanics. Discover's okay, there's just too much RNG, and it's not like it's an obscure effect either. Discover's used very commonly nowadays. Then there's the stealth mechanic. a mechanic which prevents a minion from being targeted by minion attacks or spells. It removes the already limited player interactivity because a stealth minion can't be attacked until it attacks when the stealth disappears. So you'll most likely end up getting hit without being able to deflect it at all. Then there are secrets, which I guess is their answer to the counter system in Yu-Gi-Oh! Once it's been cast, there's almost nothing you can do about it. I say almost because there are actually a few cards that can destroy your Stealer secret, preventing it from being activated. Do you want to know how many cards were made specifically to deal with secrets? 5. And only one of them is standard as of this video, out of the possible thousands of cards in the game. Predicting what they are, going through the motions, playing some sort of game within the game itself. Do I attack the hero? Will it affect its secret? Well, what about if I attack the minion? Will that activate its secret? What if I just play a weak minion and see what happens? There are third-party apps like Hearthstone Deck Tracker which actually gives you a list of secrets they can possibly be, but that's just a list. So yeah, it's a guessing game. Overload is a mechanic which killed the Shaman class and made it one of the worst in the game, to some extent anyway. Fortunately there are some synergies, but Overload is still one that hinders the class more than it helps, for the most part. Then there are dormant minions which are frustrating to deal with because they cannot be destroyed, targeted by effects. For the next 2 turns, you're just hoping that your board is properly set up to deal with whatever their effect does. Sometimes there's just no avoiding it. You will get hit by this big minion that does 10 damage across all enemies. A lot of the time you're just waiting for stuff to happen. Stuff that's just completely out of your control. And Dormants is a good example of this. Powerful minions that you can't affect until they have awakened, but it's too late. Their effect instantly activates when they awaken. Then there are mechanics that were pretty broken from the get-go, like Charge, which is the reason why the rush mechanic exists. Quick damage with no room to counter them in any way, shape or form was always going to be broken, and it's no wonder why Charge rarely ever sees appearances in card texts anymore. But those aren't the only mechanics. There are plenty of them, they just never see play anymore. Examples include Adapt, Recruit, Overkill, Inspire, Joust. They get introduced in one expansion, may see 2 new cards that use the keyword in the next, but then after that, instantly forgotten. I imagine the same can apply to dual classes and the corrupted keyword. They will follow suit, I imagine. What about the modes themselves? So when you play ranked matches, you gain stars, which increases your rank. You can still lose a rank after reaching a milestone, which is usually every 5 levels. So if you've reached silver for the first time, but you lose too many matches, you can end up going back to bronze again. I think there should be like a checkpoint system where if you reach one of those milestones, you can't go any lower other than the checkpoint. For example, if you reach silver 5 for the first time, the lowest rank you could be is silver 5, because at the moment you can end up going back to silver 6, 7, 8 if you lose too many times. Although I would prefer, instead of using ranks, they had a numbering system like with Mario Kart games, but that's only reserved for the legend ranking. But it takes a long time according to Joseph Anderson to get there, and whilst I consider myself to be a patient person, I'm not that patient. But the main reason you're gaining ranks is to increase the amount of prizes you get from the chests at the end of a season. There are actually 2 ranking ladders, one for standard and one for wild. Now you would have thought that you would get the rewards from both at the end of the season, like in Eternal, where you could play Exhibition and Throne, but you get both chests if you reach a high enough rank in each. In Hearthstone you don't. You only get the chest from the format with the highest rank. So for example, if you get gold 5 in standard, but you get silver 5 in wild, you only get the prize from standard since that's the highest rank. The individual cards you can get from them are random. Yet again, wildcard system in Runeterra. Blizzard, look it up. Runeterra's doing pretty well. You might want to pay attention. So most of the time you get a rare you don't want and you're disappointed. If you want solo content, there's the solo adventures, but you don't really get that many rewards from the solo adventures themselves. As mentioned earlier, they're pretty pricey considering what they are, which is a bunch of AI opponents. There are free solo adventures though, like the Book of Heroes, which has 2 of the most unbalanced battles I've ever fought in the game, which is the last 2 opponents in the Hunter story. I would show gameplay footage of that, but I don't want to go back there, man. There are numerous dungeon runs that don't really give you much at all. In Ashes of Outlands expansion, you only get a card back for completing the missions there. You can only get the Arthas skin if you defeat the Lich King with all 9 original heroes. You only get a card pack for beating each tier of the Frozen Throne solo adventure. Some of these solo adventures require you to buy chapters separately, or you can buy them all for a reduced price, even though they're still pricey, about $20 or something. Some adventures, you can play the first chapter or maybe first 2 chapters, but you have to buy the rest. Yeah, not really worth your time really in my opinion. Tavern Brawl. Some of these Tavern Brawls can be insane. There's one where every time you play a minion, a random effect is triggered, which can lead to you getting royally screwed over, or getting the upper hand without even trying. And it adds even more RNG than what was already there in the first place. You get 1 card pack if you win the Tavern Brawl once during the week. Every other win after that, so if you get multiple wins, you get nothing. A lot of these Tavern Brawls don't even go towards completing quests anymore, when they used to in the past, as far as I recall. Even during the searching for opponents screen, the game tells you, you get jack shit for every win after the first one, it's just for fun. Well, I don't find it that fun, so I quit as soon as I get that pack. Oh yeah, and you can't choose which card pack you get, it's always a classic pack. There's Arena, which is usually not worth the investment, because you have to achieve at least 3 wins to break even, or just make a slight profit. Because yeah, you need to pay to play Arena, with real money or with gold. Oh yeah, and when you go into Arena with a Tavern Pass, it automatically uses your Tavern Pass, even if you don't want to. What if you want to use a Tavern Pass at a later date, and just want to pay with gold this time? You can't. If you have a Tavern Pass, you have to use it to get in. You have some of the newer modes too. Then there's Duels, which is equivalent to dungeon runs but with real human players instead of AI opponents. You do get extra hero power choices, problem is, there are some unlock requirements for some of these extra hero powers and treasures. And these require you to, you guessed it, collect the cards from the sets. Tedious, and just nudging you to buy more stuff. Yay! Then there's Battlegrounds, which is probably the most fun mode of all of them. Probably because it doesn't rely on you collecting cards and opening packs. The problem is how they treat free-to-play players. If you haven't bought the Battlegrounds perks with gold or real money, an absurd amount in my opinion, then you only get to choose from 2 heroes instead of the usual 4 for those who did buy the perks, which puts you at an instant handicap. Speaking of the heroes, there's obviously going to be a tier system in any game, but it's like night and day with some of these choices. Some are too slow and niche like Alexstrasza and some of the Murloc heroes, and some are the best in the entire lot, like Alakir and Ragnaros. The latter is slow as well, but has a humongous payoff, which buffs your left and right minions, and that's invaluable in this mode. And whilst it is somewhat enjoyable, you don't really get any rewards for playing it, especially if you're in the bottom 4 of the 8 players in each game. If you get in the top 4 on the other hand, you get a boost in your rating. What does that do? Not much really. And it's not just the balance of the heroes in Battlegrounds either, it's the card balance in general. The minions from the basic set are for the most part bad. That's why they never see competitive play, there are better versions of the same card, and it was done intentionally to push you towards buying card packs to get the better versions. I recommend watching Solemn's video on why the basic set is terrible. I'll leave a link in the description below. Then you have the reprints of original cards. Ysera is too slow, whilst the newer version, Ysera Unleashed, is just so much better because it's faster to play. Drawing cards is easy for a druid because there's quite a few cards you can use. Newer versions of Deathwing are better since it doesn't require you to destroy your hand and all of your minions in the battlefield, and instead can summon dragons from your hand when it dies, which is amazing. Then you have cards that don't receive enough buffs. Lurker Below's buff was welcome. The buff for Luna's Pocket Galaxy was good. It made it too good, so much so they ended up nerfing it again. From 5 mana to 7 again. If only there was a number between 5 and 7. And it resulted in many weak and outdated cards because of the lack of buffs. They would rather nerf than buff. Nerfs can get out of hand, so much so that they nerf them too aggressively. Staple cards like Warsong Commander. The key card in the Patron War deck was completely destroyed, and therefore the Patron War deck was destroyed. As mentioned, Luna's Pocket Galaxy didn't see play at 7 mana, got buffed to 5, was really good, too good, down to 7. But with the Warsong Commander, Joseph Anderson goes into more detail in his video. Yet again, link in description, really good video. It is a bit old, but you'll be surprised how many points he makes are still relevant to this day. It's a video that's aged like fine wine. Blizzard Activision's timing when it comes to changing cards. Sometimes they'll act immediately, like with the emergency patches with some of the Demon Hunter cards when Demon Hunter was introduced. Then there was Baku the Moon Eater, which was put in Hall of Fame a year earlier than it should have been. Then you have times where they take their sweet ass time to make changes. For example, with Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, she remained in her unaltered, overpowered state for over 6 months, until they eventually went, yeah, having a 9/8/8 dragon, which can generate 2 dragons for 0 mana in your hand, was too good. Similar thing happened with Leroy, and the time it took for him to enter the Hall of Fame. He was such a stable card in pretty much any wild aggro deck, ever since day 1 when he was created and introduced in the classic set. So yeah, I'd say it took about 5 years before they even thought, yeah, Jenkins is too good, let's put him in the Hall of Fame so he can't be obtained anymore in Standard, because everybody was using him. Were they just not paying attention? Communication is important, but some of the communication in Hearthstone could do with some refinement. Emos are a great way to communicate with your opponent, but without actually communicating with your opponent like a human being. But then you have emote spammers, those people that are constantly pressing the wow and amazing button, even when you're getting your ass handed to you by them. It's kind of annoying, that's why a lot of the time I just squelch them. There is no auto squelch though, so every time you enter a match you have to squelch them manually. Minor nitpick, but it would be cool if they implemented it, because many players have been asking for such a feature, and there are third-party apps like, yeah again, Hearthstone Deck Tracker, which can allow you to do such a thing. Last thing worth noting is the bugs and glitches. I'm sure a lot of these will be ironed out over time, but I thought it was worth noting some of these that I've spotted whilst recording footage for the video. There was one time where my game froze after winning, forcing me to quit the app and then back in again. This also happened about a year ago, but I don't have footage of that. There was a time where I was unable to challenge a friend because the play button was greyed out in the friends list. I tried resetting, leaving the main menu and then coming back. This friend tried the same thing but didn't work, so we couldn't play against each other, which was annoying. Then there's the achievements which you get for completing goals, like collecting enough cards, or playing a certain archetype of minions, or getting a certain win streak in a mode or something. Some of the completed achievements though wouldn't disappear properly. I'm sure it'll be corrected in a patch, but some achievements wouldn't disappear or change into the next tier of that achievement. I'm not really a fan of the achievements because a lot of them don't really do anything. You only really gain points that goes towards a gamer score like number at the top of the screen. It's just a thing to gloat about, and only a handful of achievements actually give you experience towards leveling up. There were several times where I would be in a match with an opponent, they've clearly disconnected from the match, but the match would continue as if he's still there. This happened I'd say about every 4 or 5 matches. Well, at least it leads to an easy win I suppose, but still, happens more times than I want it to. Sometimes quests would display the wrong counter. For example, a quest that tells you to play 3 matches with any of these 3 classes, but the tally will only go up to 2 instead of 3. Fortunately, when I closed them and returned back to the quest log, it was fixed, which I just find it kind of funny, and here I thought I'd show a couple of screenshots of that happening. I'm not the only one who's experienced this. And the last one worth noting for me is the misspelling of legendaries, with the A being replaced with an E for one of their bundles. They were in such a rush, they didn't bother to spell check for one of the texts in their bundles. It hasn't done enough or changed enough to keep me interested, hence why I've left, returned and left so many times. Hearthstone has wasted too much of my time investing this amount of effort and engagement for something like Hearthstone. That's why, just like the thousands of other people who have been through the battle pass, who are sick of the RNG, bugs and glitches, the card balance and power creep, the loot box system, their questionable monetization, and just the repetitiveness of the gameplay in general, I've decided to delete Hearthstone. The third-party apps related to Hearthstone, the Battle.net launcher, is definitely one of those games that's better watching than playing. So yeah, that's it. Never playing this shit again. Just sick of it. Well, if you liked this video, glad you did, and if you didn't, sorry for wasting your time. Have a good day.